All right, Sean, for this next segment, we're just going to do a little bit of shooting the shit. What have we been playing? What have we been watching? It's been a couple months, so we're not going to do everything.
Yes.
But I assume we each brought one or two things we wanted to mention. So I will let you go first. What is something you have been playing and or watching that you would like to tell the folks about in our little show and tell corner?
All right, I'll start with the game. I've got a game and I've got a show. I'm going to start with my game. I have made mistakes in my life, Jonathan, where you know that I love Genshin Impact, and I've been playing Genshin Impact obsessively since that game has released.
Are you playing Honkai Star Rail?
No, I have not played Honkai Star Rail. I made a vow to myself. I was like, I can't have another one of these games in my life, because they put out Honkai Star Rail, HoYoverse, the company that makes Genshin. These are gacha games, right? And Genshin is a big open-world gacha game. I love that game to death. They're putting out Natlan, the next region, very soon. By the time this podcast will be out, Natlan will be out, and I'm very excited for that. But I deliberately did not play Honkai Star Rail, their second game, because I was like, I just can't fit another one of these games in my life. I play Fate Grand Order on my phone, but that's a very low commitment game, and I only play a bit when there's a big update. I don't play that game very obsessively. But over the summer, they have put out a third game. They have put out the game Zenless Zone Zero, a game I planned on not playing. And then they did a collaboration with a YouTube channel I watch called Washiagana, which is a Japanese YouTube channel. And I watched that episode because I really like that YouTube channel. And I was like, oh, fuck, they got me. So I really liked what they were showing. So I've been playing Zenless Zone Zero. It is a very fun game. It came out July 4th, 2024 on Independence Day. Just to spite me, just to like rub it in my face that I'm not independent from these like long time consuming games. But Zenless Zone Zero is a lot of fun. It is a gacha game like Genshin Impact, so if you're interested in playing, know that that's what you're getting in for. It is a free to play game, so you can try it for free. But obviously, they very heavily monetize it around you buying premium currency. If you buy premium currency, or obviously you get some just from playing. But obviously they want you to buy things, and then you use that currency to roll their gacha to see if you can get characters in the game or weapons. All the gacha stuff in the character building is very similar to Genshin. I also, from what I understand about Honkai Star Rail, it's very similar there. It's the same kinds of stats, it's the same kinds of concepts on like artifacts on characters that have special effects that you build and level up and all that kind of stuff. So the top level gacha layer of the game, of the character building and team synergy stuff, is broadly similar to Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail if you have played those games. The thing that makes Zenless very different and unique, and the thing that I've enjoyed about it, is that it is very much an action game. Genshin Impact is open world. Honkai Star Rail is a turn-based kind of JRPG style game. This is very much an action game, more in the realm of a Devil May Cry or something vaguely like that. Obviously simplified compared to those games because this is available on phone as well as on PlayStation and PC. But it is very fun, and it's a thing where I've just been jonesing for an action game for a while. I feel like we just have not had one. This has been the year of giant 100 to 200 hour long RPGs, and that's like every major release we've had in this calendar year for video games, it felt like. So Zenless Zone Zero being this kind of mindless action game was exactly what I wanted. And so I've been playing it since it came out, and it's a lot of fun. There's kind of two things about it that to me make it something that really attracted me to it, that also makes it different enough from Genshin that it really made me want to play it, as opposed to Honkai Star Rail, that my perception has always been that game's too similar to Genshin. That's kind of why I didn't want to get into it. But Zenless Zone Zero's aesthetic and its whole world is very unique, and then its gameplay and the action is very different. So in terms of the aesthetic, what I really like about Zenless Zone Zero is that it's pulling from a very unique kind of like modern nostalgia. It's pulling from nostalgia for an era that I have not seen mined for nostalgia much, which is the late 90s and early 2000s. It's got a very like Dreamcast, Sega Dreamcast era kind of look to it in terms of the menus and stuff, the fonts that are used. If you like games like Jet Set Radio in that kind of era of video game, it's pulling a lot of the style and again, the font type and all that stuff is very much echoing, I think, that era of games. It's a game where your characters run a like VHS rental store is where your characters are based out of. Like it's pulling from that era of like late Blockbuster and all that kind of stuff. And it's, it's when I was a kid. So it is exactly targeting an era of nostalgia that I have that I don't think I realized I had that much. But it's combining that with a sort of cyberpunk sensibility where it's in a I guess, pseudo post-apocalyptic kind of world. There are these areas in the world that are being infected by what they call ether that create these big zones, and inside those zones are monsters, and only special people can go into the zones and fight the monsters. Those special people are the various characters you can get in the game. So it's has this whole kind of cyberpunk future thing going on while pulling from this very particular kind of retro aesthetic, which like with like tape decks and shit like that. And I'm enjoying that element of the game, and it's very unique in that regard. And then in terms of the combat, it's very fun. Like one thing I've really felt, this is very true of Genshin, it's true of Honkai based on videos I've seen of that game, and it's so true in Zenless Zone Zero. I just think HoYoverse is one of the best developers in games right now for just pure game feel. The sense of how visual design, visual effects, sound design, sound effects, music, animation, and then input, the way that all those things come together to make you as a player feel good, that when you press a button or tap your screen and you see the character do a thing in the world and the effect it has on what you do it on, the enemy or whatever, like all those things just are so precisely dialed in, and particularly things like their animation is just phenomenal. And so Zenless Zone Zero is a really satisfying game to play. When you go into a combat zone and you're chaining together these combos and swapping out party members, it's a very parry-focused game, so you have really big, heavy hit stop where, like, the enemies are sort of these big monsters will have a giant, like, orange flash will appear on screen, and if you hit the assist button, another character will come in and block the hit, and there's a huge, like, you know, white impact frame that's on the screen, and your, like, speakers shake with the sound of your character taking that impact and deflecting the blow, and then they will do their special move where they'll jump up and hit them with a lightning bolt or something, and how the visual effects and the animation of that play out is so just sort of like primordially satisfying. It really tickles that kind of lizard brain thing you have on playing video games and just wanting that very sort of visceral controller in your hand feel. And every character I feel like in Zenless really sort of like dials that in really perfectly. Every character so far has felt very, very fun to play. I've got a bunch of the characters. There's several I haven't gotten yet. I haven't spent money on the game outside of the $5 a month thing that is the same thing as Genshin, where they just give you kind of a daily allotment of currency. And if you want to put a little bit of money into the game and try it out, like that's a good thing to do, and just like play it for like a month, try out that $5 thing, see what characters you get. And it's just a very, very satisfying game to play. My favorite characters so far are Lycon, who is a wolf butler man, who's like a big wolf guy, and he does these big kick attacks, and he's an ice character, and he stuns enemies, and he is very cool and very stylish, and I like Lycon a lot. And then on that same team, I also have Ellen, who is a shark girl who has giant shears as her weapon, and so she like has a giant shark tail, and she goes around and you like chop them with the big shears, and then it infuses all of her attacks with ice. And she's very cool and a very sarcastic, cool shark girl. So I've been having a lot of fun with Zenless. Been playing it for like a month and a half at this point. And I don't know if it will like be forever in my rotation. They've only just started doing the first update for it. And I think kind of like early Genshin Impact, this first update feels a little bit thin. But it's an easy game to just sort of do your dailies with and spend like 15 minutes doing your daily missions and leveling your characters up a bit and then moving on. So if people are interested in a game like that, Zenless Zone Zero, it's very fun, and I'm curious to see kind of how the game will develop from here.
This sounds really good. The moment you said they work in a video store thing, I did go to the PlayStation Store and download it to my PS5 for my computer because I'd like to give this a try. It sounds fun, and I kind of fell off Genshin Impact because it just became overwhelming to me. But this is new. I could just give it a try.
Yeah. And the video store thing is fun because there's like, it's a very simple mechanic, but there's a daily thing you do where you assign one of your characters as like the promoter for your video store, and then they have like their favorite genres, and you pick 3 VHS tapes that are examples of their genre, like a family tape, an action tape, a documentary. And so the game has all these fake VHSs that you can see the covers, and they have like a description written for them, and it's very fun. There's a lot of like, you know, references and jokes in there, but they've put a lot of energy. I mean, HoYoverse is just the most intense company in terms of how they promote their games and like the details. Like Zenless has so far for all of the sort of limited time top ranked or S rank characters, right? The S rank is like the equivalent of the 5 stars in Genshin. For their limited time S rank characters, each one has had a full, like, 3-minute lyrical song with an animated music video that is on their YouTube channel, and they fucking rule. Particularly the second one, which is Shuin. That character's music video and song is just incredible. And the trailers they put out for the characters are just unbelievable. Like, the animation and the cutscenes and in those trailers is just fantastic. It uses all this kind of squash and stretch stuff that you usually do not see with 3D character models that are usually very rigid. They have a very animated kind of Looney Tunes quality to how they move, which is great. And so it's one of those things where HoYoverse is so good at the community building and promoting the game and building the community outside the game itself. And that's one of the other things I've been enjoying about it, is like when there's a big trailer up and then they put out this new song and you listen to that, on your phone on the drive to work, and you just kind of like, part of your brain just kind of to live in this world. And that's obviously, I've been doing that with Genshin Impact for like 5 years or something at this point. And I've got this other little part of my brain that's the Zenless part, and I'm having fun with that too.
Nice. Well, let me talk about what I've been playing, because I've been on a weird journey with video games because I did move over the last 2 months, and that kind of threw everything into chaos. I had played a shit ton of Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, the newest Yakuza game, and I'm about 70 hours into it. I'm past the point where the parties have split, for those who know that game, so Kiryu is back in Yokohama, and Ichiban is with everybody in Hawaii. And I think I'm on the first chapter back with Ichiban, after you have your first full Kiryu chapter in Japan, and then you go back to Ichiban. And I haven't played it in about a month. That has absolutely nothing to do with the game. I think that game is phenomenal. I've loved every second of it. There was something about moving and then landing here and getting resettled that like threw me off my balance with this very long kind of all-consuming game. I'm sure we've all had experiences like that. So I've been playing different things. I did go on a full run of playing all the old Castlevania games. That was very fun because I had the Anniversary Collection on my Switch, and I just started playing it one night while I was bored, and then I was like, oh, this is really fun. So I did all of, I did Castlevania 1. I tried to play Simon's Quest, and the fact that the text goes by so slowly made me stop, because that is, if you know anything about Simon's Quest, it's weird in a bunch of ways, but part of it is that when people talk to you, you cannot advance the text. The text advances itself, and it is slow. And that threw me off. Castlevania 3, fucking awesome. Super Castlevania 4 on Super NES, and then Bloodlines, which is the Genesis game. And they're all great. They're all very fun. I think of those 3 is the best that I played. I think the best classic Castlevania game ever is still Rondo of Blood, which I have played in the past, and I replayed some of. But they're all good. Honestly, my biggest surprise was I thought I was going to like Super Castlevania 4 more because it has the 8-directional whipping and all that stuff, but I actually think that kind of breaks the game in that one. I don't know if you've ever played it, Sean, but I don't think the game is balanced around the new controls well enough to where when I went back to Bloodlines, the next one, which goes back to the classic 2-way whipping, it actually felt more right to me. I thought it was going to be hard to go back to that, and it really wasn't. So that was a little surprising to me, but they are all very fun. In the middle of this, Nintendo also put out their NES World Championship new game that is out. I actually don't remember the exact title of it, but it's like NES World Championship Anniversary Edition or something. And it is this new game on Switch that is a collection of a bunch of challenges in 13 different NES Famicom games, inspired by the NES World Championships that happened in the early 90s that were documented in the terrible Fred Savage movie, The Wizard. And so it is sort of a callback to that, but it is basically a speed-running video game. It gives you hundreds of challenges across these 13 Famicom games, and it's all about getting the best times, and I'm loving that game, and I've been going back to it several times, and I've also just been going into the NES app that is on the Switch to play some of the games like Kid Icarus or Kirby's Adventure that I had never played much of, and it's kind of a cool way to get into these games. And it's also neat because I don't know of many other releases by a big publisher like this that are just about speedrunning, and it's like trying to kind of get you into a speedrunning mindset, which I've never done and never been that into. but I am actually really enjoying it in the NES Championship Edition game, and I think is a cool thing that Nintendo has put together, and I'd like to see other companies do something with this, because it's an interesting idea. Speedrunning is such a big thing, but it's almost always something that players are like adding the tools in for themselves, and not necessarily something that is built into the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I've been having fun with all of that. I did get myself a new retro controller for all my retro game adventures. I was trying to find the best one, and I realized people were praising a lot 8-Bit Do's M30, which is their version of a Sega Genesis controller. I've never used a Sega Genesis controller, except a couple times at your house when we were kids, because you had a Genesis. I did not. And people were talking about how good the D-pad was. And I've never used a Genesis D-pad, and I did give this controller a try, and I am indeed loving it, because the Genesis D-pad is basically the good version of what the Xbox 360 always tried to do, which is that it is a D-pad on a circle, but it is extraordinarily precise. You can feel all 8 directions absolutely perfectly, and it's very soft to the touch and to use. And I'm really enjoying it, because if you know the Nintendo Switch, the problem with its D-pads is that either you have the Joy-Con, which is the split 4 buttons, which is fine for a lot of like NES games, but can be harder if you ever have to go in between angles. And then there is the Pro Controller, which has the worst D-pad I've ever seen on a first-party controller, because it's mushy into the side of the controller and is inaccurate. So I picked this up from 8-Bit Do, and I'm really enjoying that. So that's been a fun retro game thing. But where I've really landed on video games, Sean, is that the thing that I'm most attracted to lately isn't really technically a game at all. It's a visual novel. I did get Tsukihime, a piece of Blue Glass Moon. Let's see, I have my special edition of it over here. I did get the special edition. It came out, I think, in June or July here in the States. It came out like 3 years ago in Japan, but it finally got this localization here, and they gave it a full special edition, which was nice. And I picked that up, and that was like right before my move, so I didn't start it right away. I did start it last week. I'm probably 10 plus hours into that. I think I am on day 7 or 8. So in the arcade route, so I am past the like first big giant crazy action scene with Vlav, who is voiced by Seto Kaiba, which I fucking loved. It's great. But if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you know that we did a whole Type Moon season over on Japanimation Station, and as part of that, we played the remake of Witch on the Holy Night, which is a seminal Type Moon visual novel, and now all of them are coming out in English. They've also put out Fate in English here, which is crazy. They did that and Tsukihime like right back to back, so I have a lot of visual novel stuff to catch up on. But boy howdy is Tsukihime good. It is exactly what I wanted after playing Witch on the Holy Night. It's got pretty much the same level of production values. It is just the most crazily well-produced thing, and of course the writing is unbelievably good. I am adoring it, and when I'm done with this podcast, I want to go read more.
Yeah, Tsukihime is phenomenal. I played it a year or two ago by importing the Japanese version, and it's just so good. Obviously, it's a remake of the original Tsukihime, but they have put in a huge amount of new content because it's only half of the roots from that game, but it's like twice as long as that game was.
Yes.
So yes, I'm just so glad it's out over here, and that they've just like gone crazy because they're putting out everything. Because they've just put out Fate Stay Night. And they've announced that they're also going to bring out Fate Hall Atraxia, which is the sort of pseudo-sequel to Fate Stay Night.
That one's crazy. I can't believe they're doing that, but I'm so happy. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it'll be like based on the Vita version that they did in like 2012 or so in Japan that has the voice acting and stuff in it. So it's just weird. It's like we went forever where the only way to play any Type Moon games was to import them, or import them in the sense of like you're going to get a fan translation or something. To try to play them, and then now they're just in the span of a couple of years are just coming out with full official English translations on modern devices, and it's nuts. I don't understand like why it took so long for a bunch of these games, particularly for Fate Stay Night. It just feels like there's been multiple opportunities for them to bring that out over here. I'm so glad though that seems like Witch on the Holy Night, I'm sure did not sell 1 million copies or anything crazy, but you know, for what is a modestly budgeted game, I'm sure that did more than well enough over here to then show them that, hey, there's like a good reason to bring these games over into an English-speaking market, because it opens you up to so many different territories, not just America. So yeah, I'm very glad that those are coming out. I'm very excited that you're playing it. Maybe I can just be a little cheat and sneak Tsukihime in my top 10 games of the year this year, even though I didn't play it this year. It's so good.
It would qualify because it's an English release this year, so it technically qualifies as a new release. But yeah, it's so crazy because this is just part 1 of the remake, and it's only 2 of the 5 original routes.
Yeah,
and they're adding a new route to the second one that is cool with a character who I immediately met this character and I went, oh, she must have a root in the next game. And I went, well, she actually didn't in the original, but they've added it here, which is cool. So, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, play this with the rest of Japan back in 2021, because it would be really hard to wait the 4 or 5 years for this second part that's coming. I mean, I know that the narratives in this half have resolution, but,
yes.
Yeah, I am excited to play more. It is so good. It is gorgeous. There's something about the form of the visual novel that is vibing with what I kind of need in my media diet right now. I didn't have room for a lot of big gameplay-ass games, but a visual novel is kind of perfect for what I'm doing in my life at this moment. And boy, Tsukihime is good. And it's also just, we did our whole review of the Garden of Sinners series based on the Kinoko Nasu light novels. And Tsukihime is in some ways an alternate version of that with its protagonist. And now I'm very much wanting to go back and watch Garden of Sinners once I'm probably done with this game, because it's so cool.
Yes, because then you also have all the fun connection with Aoko from Witch on the Holy Night, who is Shiki's mentor in this and all that stuff. Yeah, it's very cool. And then you'll go all the way down the rabbit hole like me, and you'll play Melty Blood, the fighting game on PS4 that is set in the same universe as the remake of Tsukihime. And it has a bunch of FGO characters in it.
I've been pricing it out, Sean. I think I have it on PlayStation right now because it was free in the PlayStation Essentials collection, but also I'm waiting for it to go on sale on Switch so I can add it to my Type Moon collection there because it looks awesome.
Yeah, it's very fun.
All right. What have you been watching, though, that you wanted to talk about?
All right. So, obviously it's been a while. I've watched a lot of things, but for me, the most important thing to talk about is to carry on a saga that began years ago on the weekly stuff, and we've checked in periodically, and I got to bring it over with us to Purely Academic, and that is my years-long Ultraman marathon. I don't know if marathon counts. I don't know if that word works for this, because I've been watching these shows since back and when I was in Colorado. That's when I started watching them. But for newcomers, just a little bit of context, I have been very slowly watching through the Ultraman franchise with my dad. We've kind of watched a couple episodes on the weekend, generally speaking. I usually watch a little bit more over the summer when I'm not busy. We started years ago, back when I still lived in Colorado, watching Ultra Q. We have since moved on to watching Ultraman, Ultra 7, Return of Ultraman, Ultraman Ace, Ultraman Taro, and then Ultraman Leo was the last one I talked about on weekly stuff. And I've basically done one check-in around the time I've finished up each of the Ultramans, and the last one I talked about was Ultraman Leo, which is a great Ultraman show, is the last kind of properly classic Ultraman from that lineage, because after Ultraman Leo, they took a break for several years. But Ultraman Leo, phenomenal show. I really enjoyed that one. It's also very brutal. They do kill off most of the cast of that show at the end of the third core. Kind of coming back to the full circle around to some earlier conversations of this podcast, you could definitely tell, but this will be relevant to the next Ultraman, when the different cores hit of the 12 to 13 episode chunks, because that's when they make dramatic changes in direction. Because the next Ultraman, and one I have watched in its entirety, and I've actually already moved on to the one after this, is Ultraman 80. The Ultraman series from 1980, which again is about 5 to 6 years after Ultraman Tiga. Basically, for people who don't know the history of kaiju stuff in Japan, it was very, very popular from the late 50s through to the mid-70s. Around about the mid-70s, anime started becoming much, much more popular in Japan and kind of ate a lot of the demographic that was watching, the young male demographic that was watching series like Ultraman. So a lot of kaiju stuff kind of fizzled out in the mid-70s, including the classic Godzilla movies fizzle out at the exact same time. Then you have a little bit of resurgence in the early 80s, and then you have a big resurgence in the late 80s and then through the 90s where it really comes back, and they've been relatively popular since then. But Ultraman 80 was their attempt to kind of bring Ultraman back. It had been dormant for several years, and you know how successful it was by the fact that the next Ultraman was made 16 years later in 1996 with Ultraman Tiga. So Ultraman 80 is definitely a black sheep in the franchise, though it's not a terrible show. It's just a very bumbling show. So Ultraman 80 starts with a pretty interesting premise. They basically sort of looked at this series that people might vaguely know about called Sannen Bigumi Kinpachi Sensei, which is a really wildly popular education-focused TV drama in Japan that started in 1979. And it has various seasons that have happened throughout the intervening years. This is actually a show that's referenced in the opening to Lucky Star when they go Sannen Bigumi. Koroi Sensei! Like, that's just a reference to the beginning of Kipachi Sensei. So that series was a huge hit. It's about a teacher in a school, and it deals with themes relevant to kids. So they're like, well, that show's really popular. Let's make our new Ultraman a teacher at a middle school, like Kinpachi Sensei. So that's the direction they went with for like the first 12 episodes. It's like he's Ultraman, in like fighting like evil monsters, but in his sort of like daily life, he is more this classroom teacher who's this very kind of like bumbling guy who's a new teacher, and he doesn't really know what he's doing, but gosh darn it, he cares about those kids so much, and he like it helps them with their life problems. And that section of the show, I think, is actually quite fun, especially if you're a teacher. There's like a lot of fun gags to it, but the show clearly kind of struggles in figuring out how do you balance these different parts, because you have him fighting the giant monsters as Ultraman. You've got the sort of plot of the episode, which revolves around some problem one of the kids in his class has, him trying to help them. But they also, for whatever reason, decided that they needed to have the whole apparatus of a regular Ultraman show, where you've got this government task force and a whole group of side characters working on that government task force that are trying to fight the monsters that Ultraman's human identity becomes one of the members of. So it's got the whole setup of a regular Ultraman show, and then on top of that setup, they piled on the school teacher stuff, and the show just can't really kind of manage all those things at the same time. So the ratings were very bad immediately, and they make a choice about 12 to 13 episodes in to just jettison the school stuff entirely. It is the most dramatic like redirection of a show I have ever seen. The entire supporting cast of the school side of the show is gone without a mention of it. They never bring up the fact that Yamato, the main character, is a school teacher ever again. You never go back to the school. You never see that set. Like, it's just never, ever mentioned, even though it was the thing that drove the whole show. And so from that point, about a quarter into its 50-episode run, it just becomes the most stock, standard, generic Ultraman show you have seen since the original Ultraman, where it's just, here's this guy who has Ultraman superpowers, but he's disguised as a regular person who's working for this government task force, and some giant monster shows up, and they go fight the giant monster, and he turns into Ultraman and beats it. And that's it. And there's no extra spice on there, because every other Ultraman show after the original has done something to put a spin on it. And Ultraman 80 just basically thought, well, our spin didn't really work, so we're just going to throw away that spin and revert to the basics. And it's not terrible. Like, if you like Ultraman, it's very watchable, but it's just such a sort of like shell of a show that just doesn't have anything unique to it. And so it's, it makes a lot of sense that, that after this, Ultraman went dormant for quite a while, because this just didn't really do it. There are some things about the show that are pretty funny or interesting, though. One is the theme songs fucking rule. Like, you have to go out and listen to the Ultraman 80 theme song, which is by an 80s Japanese band called Talisman, all capitals with a Z instead of an S. And Talisman rock, like the Ultraman 80 theme song, is so good. It's a bummer when they kind of replace it with another theme song, still performed by Talisman, but in the last third of the show, they bring in another theme song. It's not as good. They also have a great ending theme called Let's Go UGM, because UGM is the task force that fights the monsters. And so you have this big UGM theme over the ending theme. That's also incredibly good. So the theme songs, people have to listen to them. They're great. The other things that are funny about the show is, I said that they jettisoned all the school stuff. That's 99% true. The 1% that they didn't jettison is one of the funniest things I've seen in a show, where you can just see the the text of the contract for this actor on screen when this happens, where all the supporting cast are let go, except for one actress is brought back who was one of the other teachers at the school called Nonchan, and they bring her back as this character who is the weather lady for the UGM task force. I don't know. She's a meteorologist, I guess is the fancy way to say it. But it's the same actress. They lampshade the fact that they've recast this actress by having Yamato, the main character, in her first episode as the second character, be like, Nonchan. She's like, no, that's not me. I'm blah, 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 blah. It's like, oh, wow, you just look just like Nonchan.
Okay, so it's not the woman from the school becomes a meteorologist.
No.
She's just the actor is playing someone else? That's amazing.
Yes, and they lampshade it, and from what I understand, this actress, I'm having a hard time finding her name because she's not like super well known or anything, but she was in other shows on the network at the time. And so most of what I've seen is that the theory is she had some kind of contract that stipulated she'd be in the show for some period of time. And because she's also was working on another TV show for the network, they didn't want to like burn that relationship. So they just gave her this other character. The problem is her other character is completely irrelevant. So she's this meteorologist, but all she does every episode is she just comes in when they're like the monster's showing up and they're running down the hallway to go get in the planes to go fight the monster. She'll be in the hallway and stop them, be like, oh, well, tomorrow it's going to be real rainy, so be careful out there. And they're like, okay. And then they go to the planes, and then that's her one appearance for the episode. And every episode, she just says, like, oh, it's real sunny outside, or, oh, it's a rainstorm. It's like, great, thanks for the weather report. Anyways, we're going to go fight the monster. There's only 1 or 2 episodes where she's slightly more relevant. There's one episode that has kind of a whole PSA around the ozone layer and UV rays. That has her section of that where she gives a little lecture on like what the ozone layer is and what UV rays are. And that's like fine. That's maybe the most lines she ever has in a whole episode. But it is just so hilarious seeing this character show up every episode to just randomly tell you what the weather is and then have the characters go fight a monster, where I didn't really need you to tell me what the weather was. I can see it. It's a TV show. It's fine. It's not like a radio play or something. Like, I get it. It's sunny outside or it's a rainstorm. Like, yeah, we know. Thanks. So that is incredibly hilarious. The other thing that is so fucking funny, I couldn't believe when they did this, is there is a female character who's like kind of the female lead of the show, particularly once they get rid of the rest of the school cast. And that's the character named Emi Jono. And she is just kind of like the stock woman of the group. I mean, this is what all the Ultraman shows were forever, is that there's like one lady in the group. It's from that era of TV. And that's like just kind of like what her whole role on the TV show was. Well, in the last quarter of the show, for their last core, they decide to introduce a new character that is like a lady Ultraman named Urien. And they're like, well, we can't have 2 ladies on the show at the same time that are major characters. So they decide to kill off Emi Jono in order to make room for Urien to be a new co-lead for Ultraman 80's like pseudo love interest kind of half. And so they kill off Emi Jono. It's a very like sort of half-hearted death scene. It's whatever. Urien's in the show for the last quarter. She's fine. The thing that's unbelievable is in the last episode of the show, which has a great title. The last episode is called the Giraffes and Elephants Turned into Ice. And that's what happens. There's a zoo and it turns into ice. The leather lady has lots to say in that episode because it's a big like global warming like ice storm thing. At the end of that episode, they defeated the monster. It's got the standard Ultraman ending where the captain for the team has figured out that the main dude is Ultraman. And he's like, humanity has to stand on its own. We'll be the ones to defeat the monster. And it does that whole ending. It's the same ending Ultraman 1 has. When they come back to the base after the fight, the actress who plays Emi Jono, the character who'd been killed off by 10 episodes earlier, is standing there in a big sparkly white, like silver jumper. And you have 2 of the other side characters there. And they're like, hey, guys. Everyone walks in, they're like, it's Emi Jono. And they're like, hey, guys, we've made an android of Emi Jono because we realized everyone was so sad after she was dead. So this is Android Emi. And she goes, hello, I am Android Emi. And they put a terrible filter on her voice. And they're like, oh, wow, Emi. Oh, my God. And they all are smiling and come up and like, yay. And it's like, and now we have to say goodbye to Ultraman 80 and Urien. But we can say goodbye happy knowing that Emi's still dead, but we made a robot that looks just like her. And that's apparently good enough. And Ultraman leaves, and that's the ending of the show. And it is the most ridiculous, like, trying to make, like, the character death okay scene I have ever seen in my entire life. This is a show where you've got a giant alien who's a being made of light who can do magical bullshit. Like, why they don't just have Ultraman 80 or Urien bring her back to life baffles me. Because the most grotesque thing imaginable is that this woman was such a fucking, like, ornament in this group of people. They so didn't give a shit about her, anything about her other than the way she looks, that just having an android that looks like her is a good enough replacement for everyone to get over how sad they were that she died. And if this was, like, a much more sort of, like, intelligent show that would be the most incredible satire for the way that women are used in the team in Ultraman ever, but it's completely straight because they have no self-awareness of how fucked up what they're doing is, and it's like the best thing in the whole TV show. It's wild.
That is almost unbelievable. That's amazing, Sean. Oh my god.
It's so good. It's just the most, like, I can't believe you have trotted this character's corpse out on screen and made everyone like, oh, well, I'm so glad Emmy's sort of half back. This is amazing. So yeah, Ultraman 80, I would not really watch it unless you're a big Ultraman fan. Like, it's fun to watch in sequence. Again, the average episodes are just average episodes of Ultraman. It's like the show is, like, particularly terrible. It's got some goofy stuff in it. But I will end this on a good happy note, though, because I've started watching Ultraman Tiga, which is the show started in 1996. That is the next one. And Ultraman Tiga rules. Ultraman Tiga is incredibly good. It makes all the right choices in how to kind of like modernize Ultraman and make it a little bit more, have a kind of like a continuity, a little bit more character development, make it more of a modern style TV show for the 90s. While not jettisoning the things that are important about the core formula of the show and what makes it appealing. And I was a little bit concerned making that jump, because part of what I love about Ultraman is it's the era that it comes from and that classic monster movie stuff, which Ultraman 80 is kind of stretching getting out of that era in the first place. But all those concerns have been put to rest. I think Ultraman Tiga is fantastic. I'm like 10 episodes in. I'm very, very excited to continue watching it. And so I'll probably continue to be watching Ultraman for the foreseeable future because it continues to be a good show. And even when it's not always that good, it's still very entertaining.
That's awesome. I just hope you're episode 10. I hope at episode 13 they don't completely jettison the show and recast the main female actress as a weather lady.
Well, they likely have multiple women in the main cast of the show. So like that's a big progress. And they have like some character development and they're like important. That's like, a lot of time passed between 1980 and 1996 in terms of the role of women on these kinds of TV shows. And that's fun. And the Ultraman Tiga has to be good because they have not stopped making Ultramans since. There's been a new Ultraman show every single year since Ultraman Tiga. So, it's clearly, nice. It was a big hit and has like served as the platform for the whole modern generation of Ultraman shows. So that's fun.
That's awesome. Yeah. I don't know if I have like any one specific thing that I've been watching that I wanted to talk about. I've been on a kick of watching and going to a lot of horror movies. It's been fun. Part of it is I'm ramping up for figuring out what I'm going to be writing about in October on the Fade to Lack Substack because I want to do some horror stuff over there. Some of it is just, if you learn to like horror, there's always a movie playing in theaters. Yeah. This is what I have learned. Is a nice thing. If you're a fan of superhero movies, as many as there are, you might go a while between new ones. But if you like horror movies, there's always something down the street playing at your local Cineplex. And I've seen a lot of decent ones. My favorite one this year that was this summer was Cuckoo, the one that Hunter Schafer from Euphoria stars in. And it didn't do super well at the box office, so it's not in many theaters anymore. But you should definitely see Cuckoo. That movie fucking rocks. Neon made 3 horror movies this year. That, Immaculate, the Sydney Sweeney one, and Longlegs, which was the one that was a big hit, but that was my least favorite of the 3. Longlegs was okay. The other 2 were pretty... Immaculate is pretty good, and Cuckoo is legitimately great. So I've been watching a lot of those. I saw A Nightmare on Elm Street for the first time, the original Wes Craven. Jesus Christ, that movie fucking kicks so much ass. But the movie I really want to talk about, Sean, is something I went to the other night, kind of on a whim, because I only learned about this shortly before it happened. But Crunchyroll put in theaters for 3 nights only the latest Lisa concert movie. Lisa Live is Smile Always, Lander, which was her concert from 2023 for her most recent album, the Lander album. And they put the concert movie in a fucking theater, and there was a slight, out-of-body element to me going to that, Sean, because, you and I grew up when we had to collect anime 3 episodes at a time, and sometimes it was hard to even find them in their original Japanese. And now, the lady who sings all the anime theme songs, her movie is in fucking American theaters. That's crazy. I will say, I went on a Wednesday night, I was the only person in the theater. Yeah. Not an exaggeration, I was the one human being there for that movie, and I had a great time. Lisa rocks. Her band, I didn't even know her band was called Wonton Humans. It's called Wonton Humans. That's fucking awesome. Her keyboardist, Aki, he's kicks ass. Every time they cut to Aki, he's having the time of his life. I love this band. I love her music. This was actually I had not heard a lot of the recent songs that are on in this concert. So it was kind of cool to hear some new music. But it was just a lot of fun. And, going to see a Lisa concert movie in an American theater. What a time, Sean. What a time we live in.
Yeah, that's cutting pretty obscure at that point.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised there's nobody else there because, I mean, how many people who are fans of things like Sword Art Online or Demon Slayer even know or get like cognizant of who the artist that plays the theme songs from those shows is? Like you're starting to cut pretty thin slices in terms of who is going to know about this movie and what it's about in America. But it is awesome that it comes out. It's like because there are people, there are us, that we're out there. We know Lisa, we love her, she's cool. So I'm really glad that
she's obviously a massive star in Japan.
Yes,
in
Japan it makes perfect sense. Over here, it's like you're finding a pretty thin slice of people who are going to know enough about that to be interested in seeing the movie.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. It was, speaking of just how big Lisa is, though, it did make me reflect on, because someone, I said I was going to this movie, and they asked me who she was, and I said, she's big in Japan, she does a lot of anime theme songs, and I was trying to explain, just how big she is, and I said, well, she made her debut in, 2010, and she is still one of the hottest, artists for this kind of thing, and that is a ludicrous level of longevity for pop stars in Japan. She is kind of one of a kind, her and, people like Aimee. So, anyway, it was very fun. I enjoyed seeing it. I did also... She played her song Adamus, which is the opening to Sword Art Online Alicization. One of the Alicizations. I forget which one it is, but it's one of those theme songs. And it has a line that she says multiple times in English that is, "Shiny star, my diamond." I am totally... There's a chapter in my dissertation I have not been able to figure out the title for. I'm going to call it Shiny Star, My Diamond. That's too good. The chapter involves Sword Art Online. It's too good a title, right? That's
very good.
Just so good. Oh my God. I pulled out my phone because no one else was in the theater and wrote that note down for myself. I was like, this is great. This is an idea. And I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to bite the bullet and do that. It's too good a title.
So you're not going to call that chapter Live is Smile Always.
No. But that's apparently all her concert movies are called that, because of course Lisa is an acronym for Love is Smile Always. But yeah, I love that. She is such a dynamic stage presence. She is so funny on stage. She has such good rapport with the audience. I guess this was her first big indoor concert tour since COVID, and so she talked a lot about that. There's a whole part of her show where she keeps challenging her drummer to go the fastest tempo he can do and see if she can sing along to it. And of course, she's the most amazing singer. She sounds frankly even better live than she does in the studio. And she can do crazy fast singing and slow ballads like Homura, which she did for the encore. And it's crazy. She's a hell of a talent.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love Lisa. That's really cool.
Yeah, so that is the nerdiest thing I think we're talking about this episode.
It's definitely the most obscure thing, yeah. Even more so, I would say, than Ultraman 80.
All right, I win.